Hello and welcome to the 8th 2020 NHL Draft recap here at Scouching. Today we're going to be looking at the Edmonton Oilers, and the Edmonton Oilers had 6 picks in this year's NHL Draft, and I think overall they did fine. To start the draft at 14th overall, they took Dylan Holloway. Now, Holloway is a player that I was expecting to slip a little bit in this year's draft, but I certainly understand the logic for drafting him at 14th. He's a player that I've really liked this year, but is an interesting case study. He came as a high-scoring, high-flying skill player out of the AJHL last year, and he seemed to lack a little bit of the confidence that really allowed him to use his skill to produce points offensively. I found that Wisconsin as a whole was a really hard team to watch play. They were disjointed, with defensemen more than willing to dump pucks all over the ice and cause icings, which really prevented Dylan Holloway from flexing the offensive muscles he has. But at the end of the day, Dylan Holloway is a really versatile player. He can play center or wing. He's a physically intimidating player when he's really playing hard, with really good transition ability, skill in the offensive zone to find line mates as a playmaker, or drive to the net for chances himself. I would like to see his speed and skill work together a little more often to get right in front of the net to generate chances, but that seemed to be an issue for Wisconsin as a whole, so I can't put that at the feet of Dylan Holloway. I think he's going to be a really interesting player to watch grow and develop in the Oilers system. I think he's going to be a fine NHL player, if not a tremendously high upside pick, but if his skill and his skating can continue to develop and grow with more confidence against NCAA competition this year, I think he could be a really good pickup at 14th overall for the Oilers. The Oilers then sat around and waited until 100th overall, and surprisingly to me, used that pick to draft Carter Savoie. Now, I've seen Carter Savoie play quite a bit for the Sherwood Park Crusaders, which were a powerhouse team in the AJHL, and Carter Savoie certainly knows how to score points. But he might be one of the more frustrating players I watched in this year's draft. His defensive abilities are almost non-existent, and that's something that you can kind of get away with in the AJHL if you play on a team as strong as Sherwood Park was. I found him to be unreliable as a line mate. I found him single-handedly causing offsides by not getting out of the offensive zone with any kind of pace. But at the end of the day, there is strong fundamental talent. He's got great skill and a heck of a shot, so that's what you're betting on. But I wouldn't be surprised if Savoie had some problems converting himself from the AJHL to the NCAA, just like Dylan Holloway did. But Holloway's issues were more a high-skill player from the AJHL going to a very high-level conference with a very good program that was underperforming in Wisconsin. With Savoie, I just have questions about his fundamental ability to chip in at both ends of the ice and put in the work that is required to generate points offensively when the game gets tougher at higher levels. I think he could get there. He's got the talent. He certainly has the skill in the shot. But I really have found him to be a frustrating player to watch, and in the games that I've tracked, Sherwood Park is a very passive team at 5-on-5 that got absolutely lit up in their own end, but made it count by causing a lot of power plays for themselves or a lot of 4-on-4 opportunities where they could open up the ice and rely on individual talent a little bit more to even up the score. I don't really know if I would have picked Carter Savoie in this year's draft at all, but at 100th overall, you're betting on his shot and his skill, and I guess there are worse bets you could have made. Speaking of making bets, this one was easy. At 126th overall, I was shocked that Ty Tullio was still available. It might be too simple of an analysis, but I really look at him and say the only reason he fell was because he's not 6 feet tall and he plays center. He's a 5'9" center, but I found that he is a hard-working player. He drives play at both ends of the ice really well. There's good skill, and I just really respect how Tullio plays the game. More often than not, he caught my eye, even if I didn't track any games of his. I like Ty Tullio a lot. Not much else for me to say, but that's a great pick at 126. At 138th overall, though, the Edmonton Oilers picked Maxim Baryozin, and I've seen Baryozin play a lot. There was a teammate of his that is almost a full year younger that I really would have pushed to be drafted in Pavel Tutniev, but Maxim Baryozin is a strong power winger. Not much skating ability there at all, but he's resilient under pressure in the Russian Junior League. He got a taste of the KHL, and he's been a decent producer at multiple levels. I just really question how his game projects when you look at his lack of skating ability overall. He's strong on his feet, maybe he projects as a bottom 6 guy down the road, but I'm not sure there's enough in Baryozin to really project him, especially where he was picked in this year's draft. At 169th overall, the Oilers really left me scratching my head drafting a 21-year-old university player out of the States in Filip Engeros. I've gone back and watched some tape of him from this year. He didn't even play the year before this one for his college team. I don't really know what to say. He's kind of a guy. He plays. He produced okay, but he's already 21. I'm not sure why he was picked by the Edmonton Oilers. I don't know if someone just liked him on their scouting staff and they let the scout make the pick, but I don't really see much out of Engris moving forward, and he is much further along in his development already. Maybe he turns into something, but frankly, I don't really see it. But at 200th overall, the Edmonton Oilers made a pleasantly surprising pick, taking Jeremias Lindewall. Now, this was a player that I have seen a little bit in my tracking of William Wallander, but in the time since the draft, I've gone back and watched some tape of him, and I think there could be some interesting talent here. He's a big winger with some good skill, he works hard, and he can skate pretty well for a guy his size. I didn't really notice him much when I was tracking Wallander, but when I watched some isolated tape of him from this year especially, I think he could be an interesting pickup for a 7th round project. I don't expect a tremendous amount out of him, but he did show some interesting upside. He works hard, he gets to the net, and there's some good skill. And when you combine all of those things together, combined with the fact that you can wait for him for at least another 2 or 3 seasons before coming to North America, you might have an interesting 7th round pick here for the Oilers. You don't have to expect much, and it's the 7th round, so who really cares? But that was a pretty good swing to take, especially for a guy that I just hadn't seen much of before the draft. Especially for a guy that I haven't directly seen much of going into the draft. So for the Edmonton Oilers overall, I'm giving them a 2C. I think Dylan Holloway is a perfect meat and potatoes guy that you can work on, and whatever you get out of him, he'll be fine. Whether it's at the wing, at center, as a defense-first player, an offense-first player, I could see any of those avenues for Dylan Holloway in the years coming. He's a good hockey player, and I'm glad he didn't slip because he frankly didn't deserve to. So for the Oilers, I think they added a good player here, especially when you look at how well he played down the stretch of the season. Carter Savoie, we'll see. I think that there's enough talent to put something interesting together down the road, but there's a lot of things between the ears that I think need to come a long ways that he'll need to learn the hard way at college. But Ty Tullio is a no-brainer pick at 126, and I thought their 200th overall pick, Jeremias Lindewall, was an interesting swing to take in the 7th round. Baryozin and Engris, I don't really expect a huge amount out of either of those picks in the near future, but Baryozin can at least produce at the junior level in Russia, and with Engris, maybe in 2 years you sign him to an ELC and see what he can do, but I frankly didn't see much out of either of those guys that I think is particularly projectable. So overall, I think Edmonton did fine, and they could end up with some interesting NHL players down the road, especially with Ty Tullio going where he did, but I don't think this necessarily was a game-changing draft for the Edmonton Oilers' future, just one that was very solid overall. So that's all for this NHL Draft recap. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you can subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You'll get access to exclusive data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, a Discord server, early access to videos, and plenty of other goodies, or you can pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and we'll see you in the next one where we look at the Chicago Blackhawks.